In a Chicago corporate tower, a business development director was about to face her breaking point. What started as a performance review took a shocking turn when her manager declared, "You're replaceable." Emma Smith wasn't your typical corporate victim. For 5 years, she had cultivated million-dollar partnerships, known for turning relationships into revenue. When Derek Morrison dismissed her $50 million achievement, she had no idea she held the real power. Emma's quiet rebellion would trigger a corporate reckoning that exposed years of systematic abuse and transformed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Smith's fingers traced the edge of her portfolio as she watched James Liu reach for the gold-plated pen. 8 months of careful cultivation had led to this moment, the signing of the largest partnership agreement in her company's 15-year history, $50 million. The numbers still felt surreal, even written in crisp black ink across the contract pages spread before them on the mahogany conference table. The boardroom buzzed with quiet energy. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked San Francisco's financial district, where afternoon fog crept between glass towers like secrets between friends. Emma had arrived 30 minutes early, as always, arranging the presentation materials with the precision of someone who understood that details mattered. Every slide perfectly aligned, every document positioned for maximum impact. She'd practiced this moment in her mind countless times during those late nights spent crafting proposals, during early morning calls with James's team, during the careful dance of relationship building that had made this partnership possible. She could recite every technical specification, every revenue projection, every strategic advantage this deal would bring. This was her victory. Her vindication of 5 years spent proving herself worthy of recognition. "Congratulations on this milestone, Emma." James Liu's voice carried genuine warmth as he set down the pen. His dark eyes found hers across the polished table, and she felt a flutter of pride at the sincerity in his expression. "Your vision for integrating our platforms is exactly what Nexus Corp needs to reach the next level." Emma opened her mouth to respond, to finally claim this moment that belonged to her, when Derek Morrison's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Thank you, James. I have to say, architecting this partnership has been one of the most rewarding challenges of my career." Derek's smile was perfectly calibrated, confident without being cocky, humble without diminishing his claimed achievement. He moved to stand beside James, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the contract. Architecting. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Derek hadn't attended a single client dinner, hadn't spent hours understanding James's company culture, hadn't crafted the technical specifications that made this deal possible. But there he stood, accepting congratulations with the ease of someone accustomed to claiming credit. "Derek's leadership has been instrumental," agreed Bob Henderson, the company's silver-haired founder from his position at the head of the table. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that sets us apart." Emma felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller in her chair as the conversation flowed around her like water around a stone. This was the pattern she knew too well, the moment when her careful work became someone else's triumph, when months of her life transformed into footnotes in Derek's success story. James Liu's brow furrowed slightly. "I'm sorry, Derek, but I want to make sure I understand the structure correctly. Emma, you were explaining the integration protocol during our call last week, the one about data synchronization across platforms. Could you walk us through that again?" The question was a lifeline, thrown with the precision of someone who'd noticed the dynamics at play. Emma felt every eye in the room turn toward her, This was her chance, her moment to step forward to claim ownership of the work that had consumed her life for the better part of a year. Instead, she glanced at Derek. His jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly, but his smile remained fixed. Behind those blue eyes, she recognized the warning she'd learned to read over 3 years of working under his management. The subtle shake of his head, the barely perceptible narrowing of his gaze. "Of course," Em heard herself say, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "The protocol ensures seamless data flow between our systems." She began reciting the technical details, watching as Derek relaxed, satisfied that she would remain in her designated role as the competent subordinate who executed his vision. As she spoke, Emma caught James watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Interest, certainly, but something else too. A shrewdness that suggested he saw more than most people in this room understood was happening. 20 minutes later, as handshakes were exchanged and business cards were collected, Emma found herself once again relegated to the periphery. Derek worked the room with practiced ease, accepting congratulations and discussing next steps as if the partnership had sprung fully formed from his mind. "Emma," James appeared beside her as she gathered the presentation materials. "I wanted to thank you personally. Your insights during our initial meeting at the Tech Summit about the importance of maintaining data integrity during integration, that's what convinced me Nexus Corp needed to partner with your company specifically."
Heat rose in Emma's cheeks. He remembered, not just the meeting, but the specific conversation she thought might have been lost in the noise of a crowded conference hall. "I'm glad the partnership worked out," she replied carefully. "I think both companies will benefit significantly." "I hope we'll have more opportunities to collaborate directly. Your understanding of enterprise software architecture is exactly what we need for Phase 2 of our expansion." Before Emma could respond, Derek's voice boomed across the room. "James, before you leave, I wanted to discuss the implementation timeline. Emma, could you handle the cleanup here? I need to walk Mr. Liu through the strategic oversight process." Emma nodded, though something small and vital seemed to die inside her chest. She watched as Derek guided James toward the door, already launching into explanations about management protocols and strategic vision, concepts that sounded impressive but carried none of the technical depth James actually needed. As the boardroom emptied, Emma remained behind, methodically packing away the presentation materials that represented months of her life. Each slide, each projection, each carefully crafted solution now existed only as supporting evidence for Derek's narrative of leadership and innovation. Through the conference room's glass walls, she could see her colleagues celebrating in the adjacent break area. Sarah Martinez caught her eye and gestured toward the coffee station, but Emma shook her head. She needed a moment to process what had just happened. Again. The afternoon fog had thickened outside the windows, obscuring the buildings across the street. Emma understood how those structures felt, present but invisible, substantial but somehow overlooked. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Hope the big meeting went well, sweetheart. Proud of you no matter what." Emma stared at the message for a long moment. What would she tell her mother? That she'd secured the deal of her career but couldn't claim credit for it? That she'd once again chosen silence over self-advocacy, accepting invisibility in exchange for job security? The celebration continued beyond the glass walls, but Emma could hear Derek's voice rising above the others. "Strategic vision requires seeing connections others miss. That's what separated this deal from the typical partnership." A bitter taste filled Emma's mouth. Strategic vision, as if recognizing the potential for partnership required some mystical gift rather than months of research, relationship building, and technical expertise. As if anyone could have closed this deal, as Derek would undoubtedly claim in private conversations. Emma closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. 5 years. 5 years of accepting this dynamic, telling herself that hard work would eventually be rewarded, that competence would speak for itself. 5 years of watching lesser talents advance while she remained in supporting roles, essential but unrecognized. As she walked toward the elevator, Emma cut fragments of Derek's conversation with the other managers. Honestly, anyone on the team could have closed that deal. The relationship was already established. It was just a matter of execution. The words hit her like a physical blow. Anyone could have closed it. 8 months of her life reduced to a matter of simple execution. Her careful cultivation of trust with James Liu's team, her innovative solutions to technical challenges, her late nights ensuring every detail was perfect, all dismissed as routine work that required no particular skill or insight. Emma pressed the elevator button with more force than necessary. The golden handcuffs that had kept her bound to this position, the steady paycheck, the benefits, the fear of starting over, suddenly felt less shackles than security. The elevator doors slid open, and Emma stepped inside, her reflection staring back from the polished steel walls. She looked professional, competent, successful, but beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in 5 years, Emma found herself questioning whether quiet excellence was a strategy worth pursuing, or simply another name for accepting the unacceptable. As the elevator descended toward the parking garage, Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from James Liu, sent directly to her personal account. Emma, thank you for an excellent presentation today. I'd like to discuss some additional opportunities when you have a chance. Would you be available for a call next week? James. Emma stared at the message, her heart beating faster. James Liu wanted to speak with her directly, not through Derek, not as part of a team, just her. For the first time that day, Emma allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps quiet excellence hadn't been completely invisible after all. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she set down her phone after reading James Liu's email. The parking garage's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows between the concrete pillars. She sat in her Honda Civic for several minutes, processing the day's events before finally driving home through San Francisco's evening traffic. 2 weeks later, Derek's assistant scheduled Emma's annual performance review with the clinical efficiency of someone booking a routine medical procedure. Emma entered Derek's corner office at precisely 2 p.m., carrying a folder thick with documentation of her achievements, the Nexus Corp deal, 3 other successful partnerships, and client testimonials praising her innovative solutions. Derek barely glanced up from his computer screen. "Take a seat, Emma. Let's get through this quick." The office reeked of expensive cologne and artificial confidence. Derek's walls displayed his MBA diploma prominently, flanked by photos of him shaking hands with various executives. None featured Emma, despite her presence at most of those meetings. Overall performance rating. Meets expectations, Derek announced, sliding a form across his mahogany desk. You've done adequate work this year, though there's significant room for improvement in leadership qualities. Emma stared at the document. Meets expectations? After the biggest deal in company history? Derek, I brought in $50 million in revenue this quarter alone. Which was a team effort, he interrupted smoothly. Leadership means recognizing that individual contributions are part of a larger strategic vision. Your tendency to seek personal recognition actually undermines team cohesion. The words hit like a slap. Personal recognition, as if wanting credit for her own work was some character flaw. I've also noted concerns about your communication style, Derek continued, pulling out another file. Too aggressive in client meetings, too focused on technical details instead of relationship management. Emma's throat tightened. She'd received nothing but praise from clients, including James Liu specifically. Can you provide examples? Derek's smile was razor thin. Emma, I need you to understand something fundamental about this industry.
You're replaceable. There are dozens of business development professionals who could handle your responsibilities. What makes someone indispensable is strategic thinking, seeing the bigger picture. Replaceable. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell. I'm recommending you for the mentorship program, Derek added with false magnanimity. Help you develop the leadership mindset needed for advancement. Emma opened her folder, but Derek was already standing. I think we're done here. Oh, and Emma, the promotion opportunities you asked about earlier this year, I've decided to look for external candidates. Fresh perspectives, you understand. As Emma walked back to her cubicle, Derek's words replayed in an endless loop. Replaceable. After 5 years of 60-hour weeks, after bringing in millions in revenue, after sacrificing weekends and relationships for this company, she was replaceable. Her hands shook as she opened her desk drawer, revealing a stack of emails she'd printed from James Liu. Direct communications, specific praise for her innovations, recognition of her unique value. Maybe she was replaceable to Derek, but apparently not to everyone. Emma stared at James Liu's emails until the words blurred together. The office had emptied around her, fluorescent lights casting long shadows across her cluttered desk. Derek's voice still echoed in her mind, replaceable, but these printed messages offered a different narrative entirely. Burning the midnight oil again? Emma looked up to find Sarah Martinez approaching with 2 steaming coffee cups, her concerned expression illuminated by the desk lamp's warm glow. Sarah's dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her crisp blouse showed no signs of the 12-hour day she'd just endured. Rough performance review, Emma admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. The warmth spread through her fingers, grounding her in the moment. Sarah settled into the adjacent chair, her movements careful and deliberate. Let me guess, Derek found new ways to minimize your achievements while positioning himself as the strategic mastermind. Emma snapped her head up. How did you... Because he did the same thing to me last month, and to Maria before she transferred departments, and to Janet before she quit altogether. Sarah's voice carried the weight of someone who'd been carrying secrets too long. Emma, I've been documenting his behavior for 8 months now. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to find. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, its pages filled with neat handwriting and sticky note tabs. March 15th, Derek takes credit for your client retention strategy in the quarterly report. March 22nd, tells Bob Henderson that your pricing model was his idea during the budget meeting. Sarah flipped through pages methodically. April 3rd, blocks your application for the senior director position, citing concerns about your collaborative skills to HR. Emma's throat tightened. She blocked my application? I never even knew there was an opening. There have been 3 openings this year that matched your qualifications perfectly. Derek made sure your name never reached Bob's desk. He's been systematically sabotaging anyone who threatens his position. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. 3 opportunities, 3 chances for advancement stolen before she'd even known they existed. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Sarah's expression softened. Because I needed my job. Because I have a daughter to feed and health insurance to maintain. Because speaking up without solid evidence would have
Just made me another casualty. She paused, studying Emma's face. But after what happened today, I realized staying silent isn't protecting anyone anymore. What exactly happened today? Derek spent 20 minutes after your review telling anyone who'd listen that you were lucky the Nexus Corp deal went through, that any competent manager could have achieved the same results. Sarah's voice hardened. He's already positioning himself for the next promotion cycle, using your work as evidence of his leadership capabilities. Emma felt something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too temporary. This was something more dangerous. Recognition. There are others, Sarah continued.
Lisa from accounting overheard Derek on a conference call last week claiming he developed the integration protocol that James Liu specifically praised you for. Marcus from IT has emails showing Derek requesting credit for system optimizations you designed. Emma stared at her reflection in the office window's dark glass. For 5 years, she'd convinced herself that hard work would speak for itself, that competence would eventually be rewarded. She'd been playing by rules that didn't exist, fighting a game where the deck was stacked against her from the start. What are you suggesting we do? Sarah closed her notebook carefully. I'm not suggesting anything, but I'm tired of watching good people get destroyed while incompetent men fail upward. She met Emma's gaze directly. The question is, how tired are you? Emma thought about Derek's smug satisfaction during her review, about the 3 stolen opportunities, about James Liu's email sitting in her personal account, recognition from someone who valued her actual contributions. Very, Emma said finally. Very tired. Sarah smiled for the first time that evening, and Emma realized she wasn't alone in this fight. Emma's hand shook slightly as she knocked on her mother's front door Saturday morning. The small craftsman house in Oakland looked exactly as it had throughout her childhood, meticulously maintained despite its modest size, with Margaret's prized rose garden blooming defiantly against the urban backdrop. Emma, honey! Margaret opened the door with flour-dusted hands, her graying hair pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn for decades. You look thin! Are you eating properly? The familiar kitchen embraced Emma like a warm hug. Framed photos covered every available surface. Emma's college graduation, her first job, company award ceremonies where she stood proudly beside achievements that were now being claimed by others. The irony wasn't lost on her. Mom, I need some advice. Emma settled at the Warren Formica table where she'd done homework throughout high school, watching her mother pour coffee from the ancient percolator. Work troubles? Margaret's intuition hadn't dimmed with age. She'd raised Emma alone after her father walked out, working double shifts at the hospital to pay for Emma's education. Every sacrifice had been made so Emma could have opportunities her mother never had. My manager has been taking credit for my work, major work, and I just found out he's been blocking my promotions without me knowing. Emma's voice caught slightly. He told me I'm replaceable. Margaret's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Something shifted in her expression. A shadow Emma had never seen before. Replaceable, Margaret repeated slowly, setting down her cup with deliberate precision. You know, honey, I never told you about my supervisor at the hospital, Mr. Patterson. Emma leaned forward. Her mother rarely discussed the specifics of those difficult years. Smart man, college educated, made sure everyone knew it too. Every improvement I suggested for patient care protocols, every efficiency I identified during my 20 years there, suddenly became his innovation in the monthly reports. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Emma had never realized her mother's experiences might mirror her own. I stayed quiet, Margaret continued, her voice growing softer. Told myself I was lucky to have steady work, that speaking up would just cause trouble. Single mothers couldn't afford to be seen as difficult. She looked directly at Emma. You want to know what staying quiet cost me? Emma nodded, sensing they'd reached a threshold her mother had never crossed before. 3 promotions to head nurse positions, a pension increase that would have meant the difference between comfort and struggle in retirement. Margaret's eyes glistened. And most importantly, my self-respect. I taught myself that my worth was tied to my ability to endure mistreatment silently. Emma felt her throat constrict. But you always told me to keep my head down, work hard. Because I was terrified history would repeat itself. Because I thought protecting you from conflict would keep you safe. Margaret reached across the table, grasping Emma's hand. But I was wrong, sweetheart. I was protecting you right into the same trap I fell into. The kitchen clock ticked steadily above them, marking moments of understanding that had been decades in the making. What should I do, Mom? Margaret's grip tightened, her voice carrying a strength Emma had never heard before. Fight for yourself, because no one else will. Don't let some insecure man steal 30 more years of your life the way Patterson stole mine.
Emma felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Her mother's blessing to fight back carried the weight of generational wisdom and generational regret. For the first time in weeks, Emma knew exactly what she needed to do. Emma's mother's words echoed in her mind as she walked into the sleek HR office Monday morning. Fight for yourself, because no one else will. The confidence from their weekend conversation carried her through the elevator mide to the 15th floor, where Alex Kim's corner office overlooked the city's financial district. "Emma, please sit." Alex's smile was professionally warm, but didn't reach her eyes. The HR director's office was a study in calculated neutrality, motivational posters about teamwork balanced by legal compliance certificates, creating an atmosphere that promised support while maintaining corporate distance. "I appreciate you making time for me, Alex. I need to file a formal complaint about my manager's conduct." Emma placed Sarah's documentation on the polished desk, her heart racing, but her voice steady. Alex's expression shifted subtly, the warmth dimming like a light being turned down. "The HR director is going to be frank with you, Emma. Formal complaints require extensive investigations. They create complications for everyone involved, including the person filing the complaint." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Emma felt her stomach tighten as she realized Alex wasn't an ally. She was part of the system protecting Derek. "What about the other employees who've experienced similar treatment?" Something flickered across Alex's face. Surprise, then calculation. "Other employees?" Emma realized she'd revealed more than intended. Sarah mentioned, "Sarah Martinez has never filed a formal complaint. Neither has anyone else on Derek's team," which suggests that perhaps these issues aren't as widespread as you believe. The lie was delivered with such professional smoothness that Emma almost believed it herself. Almost. "Actually," Alex continued, pulling out a different file, "Derek has specifically mentioned concerns about your collaborative approach. He's been trying to help you develop better team integration skills." Emma stared at the file with her name on the tab. How long had Alex been preparing for this conversation? "What I'm suggesting," she said, her tone becoming almost maternal, "is that you focus on professional development rather than formal complaints. We have excellent leadership coaching programs, conflict resolution workshops. Sometimes the best way to advance is to work on ourselves first." Emma felt the walls closing in. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. HR existed to protect the company from liability, not to protect employees from abuse. "I see," Emma said quietly, gathering the documents Alex had barely glanced at. As Emma walked back to her desk, she realized that Sarah had been right. The proper channels were designed to discourage reporting, not encourage justice. If she wanted change, she'd have to find another way. Her phone buzzed. James Liu's name appeared on the screen, and suddenly Emma remembered she wasn't as powerless as Derek or Alex believed. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she answered James Liu's call, stepping into an empty conference room for privacy. The disappointment from her HR meeting still burned in her chest, but something about James's direct approach cut through the corporate fog that had been suffocating her. "Emma, I hope you don't mind me calling directly." James's voice carried its characteristic warmth, but there was something more focused in his tone today. "I've been thinking about our partnership expansion, and I wanted to discuss some concerns." Emma settled into a chair, grateful for the glass walls that let her monitor the office while maintaining privacy. "Of course. What can I help clarify?" "It's about the follow-up communications from your team, specifically Derek's emails about implementation timelines." James paused, and I could hear the careful diplomacy in his voice. "They demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of our technical requirements." Emma's pulse quickened. She'd seen Derek's emails to the Nexus Corp team, generic corporate speak that revealed his complete lack of comprehension about the partnership's technical complexities.
I'm concerned, James continued, because the person who designed our integration protocol clearly understands our needs, but the person claiming to oversee implementation doesn't seem to grasp even basic concepts we discussed. Emma found her voice. What specific concerns do you have? Yesterday, Derek suggested we could handle data migration in 48 hours. Emma, you and I both know that's impossible without compromising security protocols. It would take weeks to do properly. James's frustration was becoming more apparent. He also proposed eliminating the redundancy systems you specifically designed to protect both our platforms. Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. Derek wasn't just claiming credit, he was actively undermining the work with his incompetence. James, I need to be transparent with you about something. Emma took a deep breath, her mother's words echoing in her mind. The integration protocol, the security measures, the implementation timeline, I developed all of those. Derek is managing the relationship, but he wasn't involved in the technical design. The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. When James spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, relief mixed with something that might have been vindication. I wondered about that. Your understanding of our infrastructure during our initial meetings was exceptional, but Derek's recent communications trailed off diplomatically. Have been concerning, Emma finished. To put it mildly, James's tone grew more direct. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest. If Nexus Corp wanted to expand this partnership significantly, would we be working with you directly, or would all communications have to go through Derek? Emma's heart began racing. The question carried implications that seemed too large to process. What kind of expansion are you considering? Phase 2 of our integration, another $50 million in partnership value, potentially growing to $200 million over 3 years. James's words carried the weight of opportunity. But Emma, I need to work with someone who actually understands the technical requirements, someone I can trust to execute properly. Emma stared at her reflection in the conference room window. $200 million. The kind of partnership that could transform careers or companies. Would that person be you? James asked. Emma felt the walls of her corporate prison shifting around her. For 5 years, she'd believed her value was tied to this company, this position, this toxic dynamic with Derek. But James Liu was offering her something different, recognition of her actual worth in the marketplace. James, if I were to leave my current position, would Nexus Corp still be interested in pursuing that expanded partnership? Emma, I'll be completely honest with you. We're not interested in working with your company. We're interested in working with you. The partnership succeeds because of your expertise and integrity. Without you, he let the implication hang unfinished. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. She wasn't replaceable to Derek's company. She was irreplaceable to their biggest client. I think, she said carefully, we should schedule a more detailed conversation about Phase 2. I was hoping you'd say that, James replied, and Emma could hear the smile in his voice. How does Thursday work for you? Emma felt power she'd never recognized flowing through her veins like electricity. Derek had been wrong about everything. She wasn't replaceable. At all. Emma's newfound confidence carried her through the next 2 days like armor. James Liu's words echoed in her mind. We're not interested in working with your company. We're interested in working with you. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that she almost felt dizzy with the implications. Thursday afternoon, Derek's assistant sent an email that made Emma's blood boil. Emma will not be needed for tomorrow's Nexus Corp strategy meeting. Derek will handle all client communications moving forward.
Emma stared at the message, watching Derek through his glass office walls as he practiced his presentation gestures. He was preparing to discuss Phase 2 expansion. Her Phase 2 expansion, without her. At 6 p.m., when the office had emptied except for the cleaning crew, Emma knocked on Derek's door. Derek. Derek looked up from his laptop with barely concealed irritation. I thought you'd left already. We need to talk. Emma closed the door behind her and took the seat across from his desk without invitation. About the Nexus Corp partnership. Derek's jaw tightened slightly. What about it? James Liu called me directly this week. He has concerns about your understanding of the technical requirements. Serious concerns. James Liu shouldn't be calling you directly. All communications should go through me. Derek's tone carried the authoritative edge he used to establish dominance. I'll need to have a conversation with him about proper protocols. Emma almost smiled. Derek, he called because you suggested handling data migration in 48 hours for a system that requires weeks of security testing. Something flickered across Derek's face. Uncertainty masked quickly by bluster. The timeline is aggressive, but achievable with proper project management.
You don't even understand what data migration means in this context. Emma leaned forward. You've been taking credit for work you can't even comprehend. Derek stood abruptly, his 6-foot frame towering over her seated position, the intimidation tactic that had worked for years. Emma, I think you're forgetting who makes the decisions around here. Am I? Emma remained seated, unmoved by his attempt at physical dominance, because James Liu specifically requested to work with me, not the company, me. Derek's face flushed red. That's insubordination. You're actively undermining my authority. I'm protecting a $200 million partnership from your incompetence. The number hit Derek like a physical blow. His eyes widened as he realized Emma knew about the expansion opportunity he'd planned to claim as his own discovery. You think you're irreplaceable? Derek's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I can destroy your career with one phone call, make you unhireable in this industry. Emma stood slowly, meeting his gaze directly. No, Derek, you can't. I have connections. You have a client who specifically wants to work with me, not you. Emma's voice carried a calm certainty that made Derek step backward. Fire me and watch Nexus Corp walk away from the biggest deal in company history. Derek's face went pale as the full implications hit him. Emma smiled for the first time in the conversation. So tell me, Derek, who's really replaceable here? Emma's hands shook as she dialed Sarah's number from her car in the parking garage. The confrontation with Derek had left her energized and terrified in equal measure. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Emergency coffee meeting, Emma said when Sarah picked up. Bring the others. An hour later, Emma sat across from Sarah, Marcus from IT, and Lisa from accounting at their usual corner table in the 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the office. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under their eyes, making them all look like conspirators, which Emma realized they had become. Derek knows I'm talking directly to James Liu, Emma said without preamble, and I know something that changes everything. She explained James's offer, the $200 million expansion, his preference for working with her directly, the implied invitation to leave and take the partnership with her. Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. You could destroy him. I could destroy the company, Emma corrected quietly. That's the problem. Marcus leaned forward. Emma, after what Derek has done to all of us, what about the people who haven't done anything wrong? The junior developers, the support staff, the people in marketing who depend on their paychecks. Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper. If you leave and the partnership collapses, there will be layoffs, massive ones. The weight of unintended consequences settled over the table like fog. Emma had found her way out of the maze, but escape meant potentially destroying the lives of innocent colleagues trapped inside. Sarah's eyes glistened. Emma, I need this job. Sophia starts kindergarten next year and I can't afford private school without my current salary. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. But I also can't stand watching Derek destroy another person the way he's tried to destroy you.
Emma felt the impossible weight of choice pressing down on her shoulders. Fight for herself and potentially harm dozens of innocent people, or accept continued abuse to protect colleagues who'd never asked for her protection. There has to be another way, desperately. Some option that doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself or us. Emma stared into her coffee, seeing her reflection fractured by the overhead lights. What if I stay and fight internally? Try to expose Derek through proper channels. Alex Kim made it clear the company won't act, Sarah said firmly. They'll protect Derek because changing management is harder than replacing employees who complain. So, my choices are accept abuse forever or leave and watch you all suffer the consequences. Emma's laugh was bitter. Some choice. Sarah reached across the table, grasping Emma's hand. Whatever you decide, we support you. But Emma, she grew stronger. Maybe it's time to stop making decisions based on fear of what might happen to others. Emma looked around the table at faces that had become family over years of shared struggle. They deserve better than Derek's toxicity. The question was, how much was she willing to risk to give it to them? Emma spent a sleepless weekend wrestling with her conscience, but Monday morning brought a decision she hadn't anticipated. Bob Henderson's assistant called at 7:30 a.m., requesting an urgent meeting. When Emma arrived at the executive floor, she found Bob pacing behind his mahogany desk, his usually composed demeanor cracked with visible stress. "Emma, please sit." Bob's voice carried an exhaustion she'd never heard before. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the San Francisco Bay, where morning fog rolled between the towers like secrets seeking daylight. "I received a very concerning call from James Liu on Friday evening." Emma's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected James to contact Bob directly. "He expressed reservations about our partnership management." He chose his words carefully, but Emma could see the strain in his weathered face. "Specifically, he questioned whether we have the right people overseeing such a critical relationship."
Emma remained silent, recognizing this as a crossroads moment that would define not just her career, but potentially the entire company's future. James suggested that certain communications from our team demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of Nexus Corp's technical requirements. Bob's gray eyes fixed on Emma. He was particularly complimentary about your expertise and suggested that future discussions should involve you directly. The weight of Bob's words settled between them like a challenge. Emma realized that James had diplomatically created this moment, forcing the company to confront the reality of who actually drove their most important partnership. "Emma, I need you to be completely honest with me." Bob leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "Is there something I should know about Derek's management of this relationship?" Emma felt the moment crystallize around her like ice forming on still water. This was it, the choice between institutional loyalty and personal integrity, between protecting a toxic system and fighting for systematic change. She thought about Sarah's daughter starting kindergarten, about Marcus struggling to pay his student loans, about Lisa supporting her aging parents. But she also thought about her mother's regret, about Patterson's decades of stolen credit, about the pattern of abuse that would continue if no one had the courage to speak truth. "Bob," Emma said quietly, "Derek has been systematically taking credit for work he didn't do while blocking advancement opportunities for the people who actually delivered results." Bob's face went completely still. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a documented pattern." Emma's voice grew stronger as she made her choice. "The Nexus Corp integration protocol? I designed it. The security measures James praised? My work. The implementation timeline Derek's been discussing? He doesn't understand it well enough to execute it properly." Emma pulled out the folder she'd carried since her failed HR meeting. Sarah's meticulous documentation, client emails praising her direct contributions, technical specifications that bore her fingerprints, but Derek's signature. Derek told James that data migration could be completed in 48 hours. That's not just wrong, it's dangerously incompetent. James called me directly because Derek's communications made him question our entire team's technical capabilities. Bob's hands trembled slightly as he reviewed the documents. With each page, his expression grew darker, the lines around his eyes deepening with what looked like a mixture of shock and shame. "My God!"
he whispered, looking at an email where Derek had claimed credit for a system optimization Emma had designed. How long has this been going on? Years, Emma said simply. And it's not just me. Sarah Martinez has been documenting similar incidents across the department. Derek has created a culture where competent employees are systematically undermined while he advances through appropriated achievements. Bob stood abruptly, walking to the window where morning fog was finally burning off, revealing the city's sharp edges beneath. Emma, why didn't you come to me sooner? Because I tried HR first. Alex Kim made it clear that formal complaints would be problematic for everyone involved. Emma's voice carried the weight of institutional betrayal. The system is designed to protect managers like Derek, not employees like me. 3 months later, Emma stood in the same boardroom where her journey had begun, but everything had changed. The afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating faces that looked toward her with respect rather than dismissal. She wore the confidence of someone who had fought for her place at this table and won. The Nexus Corp expansion has exceeded all projections, Emma reported to the board, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned her position through competence rather than politics. Phase 2 implementation is ahead of schedule, and James Liu has indicated interest in exploring additional partnerships worth potentially $500 million over the next 5 years. Bob Henderson nodded from his position at the head of the table, his expression carrying a mix of pride and residual shame. The investigation following Emma's revelations had been swift and decisive. Derek Morrison had been terminated within a week, along with Alex Kim, whose complicity in covering up harassment complaints violated both company policy and legal standards. Emma's leadership of the business development team has transformed not just our revenue projections, but our entire approach to client relationships. We're seeing retention rates and satisfaction scores at historic highs. Emma caught Sarah Martinez's eye across the table. Her former coffee companion now held the title of Senior Business Development Manager, having been promoted to Emma's previous position. Sarah's documentation had proven crucial in the investigation, revealing a pattern of misconduct that extended far beyond Emma's experience. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. She now sat in Derek's former chair, but the culture she'd built bore no resemblance to his toxic leadership style. Team meetings focused on collaboration rather than credit stealing. Promotion decisions were transparent, based on documented achievements rather than political maneuvering. And most importantly, she'd implemented an open-door policy that actually meant something. Before we adjourn, Emma said, shuffling her presentation materials, I want to address the employee satisfaction survey results.
The metrics told a story of institutional healing. Trust in management had increased by 60%. Reports of workplace harassment had dropped to near zero. Most significantly, employee retention had improved dramatically. The company was no longer hemorrhaging talent to competitors. The numbers are encouraging, Emma continued, but I want to be clear about something important. Creating a healthy workplace culture isn't a destination, it's an ongoing responsibility that requires constant vigilance. As the meeting concluded, Emma found herself walking the same hallway where she'd once felt invisible. Now, colleagues approached her with genuine respect, seeking guidance rather than trying to take credit for her insights. The transformation felt surreal sometimes, like waking from a nightmare to discover the world had reorganized itself around principles of fairness and merit. Emma, Bob's voice stopped her as she reached her office door. Do you have a minute? They settled into the seating area of Emma's corner office, a space that had once belonged to Derek, but now reflected her personality entirely. Plants thrived on the windowsill, technical journals lined the bookshelves, and framed photos showed her team celebrating actual achievements rather than stolen victories. I've been thinking about accountability, Bob said without preamble. Not just Derek's accountability or Alex's, but mine. Emma studied his weathered face, recognizing the ongoing struggle of a leader grappling with systemic failures that had occurred under his watch. I built this company with idealistic values, but I became complacent about protecting those values. I trusted middle management without verifying that trust was warranted.
I assumed that success metrics meant cultural health. Bob, you couldn't have known. I could have asked better questions. I could have created systems that made abuse harder to hide. The truth is, Emma, leaders who aren't actively fighting toxic culture are inadvertently enabling it. Emma nodded, understanding the broader implications of his words. That's why we implemented the anonymous reporting system and the mandatory management training and the requirement that all promotion decisions be reviewed by cross-departmental committees. Exactly. But I want to ask you something more personal. Bob leaned forward. How do we ensure that your success doesn't blind us to ongoing problems the way my early success blinded me? The question revealed Bob's deepest fear, that organizational change might be temporary, that without constant vigilance, toxic patterns could reemerge under new leadership. Emma considered her response carefully. By remembering that power corrupts when it's not held accountable, by maintaining systems that give voice to people without power, by measuring success not just in revenue, but in the health and growth of our people. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the industry article about your promotion. Your father would be proud. I know I am. Emma smiled, remembering her conversation in Margaret's kitchen months ago. Her mother's blessing to fight back had been the catalyst, but the sustained battle had taught Emma something deeper about leadership and responsibility. There's something else, Emma said, meeting Bob's gaze directly. We need to acknowledge that the work isn't finished. Creating a healthy culture is like maintaining physical health. It requires daily commitment, not just crisis intervention. What do you mean? I mean, we celebrate the progress we've made, but we stay vigilant about preventing future abuse. We promote based on competence and character, not just results. We listen to concerns before they become crises. Emma paused, thinking about Sarah's daughter starting first grade, about Marcus finally feeling secure enough to buy a house, about all the employees who now came to work without fear. Most importantly, she continued, we remember that every person in this company deserves to have their contributions recognized and their potential developed. The moment we forget that, we risk becoming what we fought to change. Bob nodded slowly, and Emma saw understanding in his eyes, not just of her words, but of the ongoing responsibility they represented. As evening approached and the office gradually emptied, Emma found herself alone in the boardroom where her transformation had begun. She thought about Derek's final words during his termination meeting. You'll regret this. You'll never find another opportunity like this one. He'd been wrong about that, too. The opportunity hadn't been working for his company, under his management. It had been discovering her own worth and fighting for the right to claim it. Emma gathered her materials and headed for the elevator, passing the photo wall where her achievements now bore her own name. But more satisfying than personal recognition was the knowledge that the next Emma who walked into this company would find a culture worth belonging to. The fog was rolling in over San Francisco's financial district as Emma drove home, obscuring some buildings while revealing others more clearly. Like her own journey, she realized. Sometimes you had to navigate through the fog of toxic systems to discover what had been there all along. Her own power, her own worth, her own responsibility to protect both for herself and others. The fight was never really over, but for the first time in years, Emma felt equipped to win it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.